like to start we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Minister, Honorable Minister Dr. Joseph Mali. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I would like to call in the President of the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly, the Zimbabwe chapter, to give us some welcoming remarks. Mr. Nema Shape.
The guest of honor, Minister of Agriculture, Mechanization and Irrigation Development, Honorable Minister Dr. Joseph Made, Honorable Minister Okamchunguri Kashiri, the Minister of Environment, Water and Climate, Clerk of Parliament, Honorable Members of Parliament, United Nations Resident Coordinator, Coordinator Africa Regional Climate Change Program, UN Environment, Africa Office, Dr. Richard Munang, EBAFOSA Chapter Secretariat, Agriculture Research Council, Dr. Isaiah Malapala. Representatives from government, private sector, civil society, academia, research institutions, faith-based organizations, media, ladies and gentlemen. To date, 15 country bureaus have been established across the continent, and Zimbabwe is number 16. Our membership comprises individuals, government institutions, and private organizations. I encourage individuals and institutions to register with us through the EBAFOSA website. I'm grateful to the coordinator, Africa Regional Climate Change Program, Dr. Richard Munang, for pioneering this important Pan-African initiative. We are building Africa together, ourselves, and that is the way to go. They say anyone can sail a ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. So we'd like to thank you, Dr. Munang, for such a splendid effort. We thank the government of Zimbabwe for the support and partnership towards establishing EBAFOSA Zimbabwe chapter. We look forward to your continued support as we harness the strengths of various ministries towards the realization of our goals and objectives. We welcome support, partnerships, and networking with all stakeholders in realizing an ecosystem-based, adaptation-driven agro-industrialization for Zimbabwe. For Zimbabwe to be able to feed herself, initiatives such as EBAFOSA, which support government efforts, are critical to embed in national policies and economic development actions. We appeal to government for support in providing an enabling environment to ensure that we are able to achieve EBA-driven agro-industrialization, henceforth participating in addressing national priorities and policies such as ZIMASET, the INDCs, the Climate Policy, National Climate Change Response Strategy, Zimbabwe Agricultural Investment Plans, and many other relevant national priorities and policies. EBAFOSA is an inclusive institutional framework which aims to harmonize in a participatory way the decentralization of policy and implementation of actions towards upscaling EBA-driven agriculture and provide linkages across the value chain. Among the strengths of EBAFOSA is peer learning and the exchange of innovative approaches among member countries. We look forward to engaging not only our local stakeholders, but also our regional counterparts in this endeavor. Our work is being guided by EBAFOSA Vision, a food-secured Africa with sustainable ecosystems, and legal documents including the Constitution, action agenda, rules of procedure, strategic and operational framework, which focuses on implementation of phase 1 and 2, which involve mobilizing and registering members as well as developing linkages among registered members. Southern Africa is the most affected by climate change, and in particular Zimbabwe, with the negative impacts being expected to worsen in the near future. With an agricultural sector largely dependent on seasonal rainfall patterns, the urgency to adapt to climate change is increasing. We need to find ways to address food security and climate change. EBAFOSA provides a model where linkages are developed from the smallholder farmer to the consumer through a value chain approach, which is climate sensitive. We hope to be closely working with government, the United Nations, as well as private sector, media, civil society, academia, research, and others in our efforts to increase climate resilience in vulnerable populations of Zimbabwe through EBA-driven agro-industrialization. You are all welcome to join EBAFOSA Zimbabwe chapter, where we hope to create sustainable socio-economic transformation for Zimbabwe and Africa. Thank you.
At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, I need to call in now Dr. Richard Munang, who is the Africa Regional Climate Change Program, UN Environment on the Africa Office. Dr. Munang.
The Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Mechanization and Irrigation Development, Honorable Dr. Joseph Madden, senior government officials, senior government officials from the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Mr. Bisho Parajuli, sister UN agencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, as they say in Africa. It is a great honor for me to be here today at this auspicious launch of EBAFOSA Zimbabwe National Branch. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as you can see on the screen, there is a question which goes as whether we know that when spiders unite, they can tie down a lion. As we all know, in September 2015, the world came together and adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. And these goals were glamorous, with intent to leave no one behind. But standing between us today and this glamour is the lion of poverty. Standing between us today and this glamour is the lion of climate change, which is already reversing the gains that have been made in the African continent. Standing between us and this SDG glamour is the lion of food insecurity, is the lion of youth unemployment, and the list goes on and on. But no problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. And together in this SDG Accord and Agenda 2030, we can tie down the lion and actualize the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals for ourselves and future generations. And I will tell you why we have to do so. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, just imagine for a moment, as you can see in the infographics on the screen, a mother who cannot feed her newborn baby with the proper food needed to reach the age of 5. Imagine this mother across the African continent today, tilling the soil all day under the scorching heat of the sun, but still go to bed without the required food needed to feed herself, her family. Yet this is the reality of our millions across the African continent today, affecting millions. Sadly, this reality is replicated, and this is why we must tie down the lion of food insecurity, of poverty, of youth unemployment in the African continent today. What makes the situation, Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, even worse, let's face it. The African continent is endowed with a natural world. I'm talking about the 65% of the uncultivated arable land. I'm talking about the 10% of internal renewable fresh waters. I'm talking about the abundant renewable energy resources in the African continent today, which, if tapped into, can complement the agricultural sector to achieve an agro sector which is worth $1 trillion in less than 13 years from today. I'm talking about the millions of unemployed who are currently at 60% across the African continent today. But amidst this abundance, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there are 240 million African citizens who go to bed hungry. And currently, malnutrition is affecting up to about 200 million and killing over 50% of children across the continent before they reach their 5th birthday. And as we speak today, Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the continent is spending $35 billion every year importing food, and these projections are projected to reach about 110 billion in the next 5 years if nothing is done. And the continent, as a result of inefficiencies in the agro value chain, is losing $48 billion, costing the continent a lot of food that is needed. Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Zimbabwe have abundant water, good soils and climate. And however, with the changing climate, the agricultural sector currently is employing almost 70% and contributing about 45% of exports and contributing to the GDP. The agricultural sector, as it is in most African countries in the African continent today, is a sector that can be able to reduce poverty more than any other. But as we speak, Honorable Minister, whose harvest losses are further compounding Zimbabwe agro productivity. Continuing challenge across the African continent today is climate change, which is already defining the contours of the continent more dramatically than any other in this century, representing not only an increasing threat, but projected to impact agro productivity in ways never ever seen before. Your country, Zimbabwe, where agriculture is 80% rain-fed, is projected to experience up to about 8% fall in per capita water availability in the next 33 years from today, as the climate projections show. The impact could actually cause up to about 30% decline in agricultural production, further compounding food insecurity. Your Excellency, these challenges, in addition to the pressing challenges across the African continent today, soil degradation is affecting the continent and costing the continent $68 billion every year. The seemingly end of commodity super cycle, translating to a tumbling commodity price that has costed the continent $63 billion. With all this put together, it is clear, it is becoming apparent that without economic diversification through optimizing the food systems, the soaring hopes of a rising Africa risk just being a mirage. Targeting, therefore, highly catalytic natural capital-based sectors, especially the optimized ecosystem-based adaptation-driven agro-value chain, and linkages to expanding clean energy assets is the most opportune moment which we have to tap into. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the parable of lack amidst plentiful opportunities has been Africa's Achilles, and this needs to be addressed. And these, with the policy frameworks across the world that have been adopted, are representing an opportunity that we can tap into. Starting the 1st of January 2016, the architecture of global development changed. And Africa, like the rest of the world, wake up to a new world, promising opportunities building on what the global community of nations did in 2015. And September 2015, the world unanimously adopted the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, unequivocally endorsing the promising road to a more environmentally sustainable and inclusive economic world where no one should be left behind. In December of the same year, the world came together in Paris and adopted the Paris Climate Change Agreement, with intent to move towards a low-carbon pathway and provide the global policy anchor for environmentally sustainable growth. These initiatives all dovetailed to the African Union Agenda 2063 with intent to create the Africa we want and provide a high-level strategic policy framework that could potentially transition the African continent into economic, social, and environmental progress in the next 13 years as we speak. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, optimizing the agro-value chain is the silver bullet to unleash food to livelihoods opportunities for millions across the African continent today. The World Bank reports that in Africa, simply raising crop yields by 10% reduces poverty by up to about 7%. Neither the manufacturing, the services sector can boost such a profound impact on poverty. And at the same time, growth in agriculture is at least 2 to 4 times more effective in reducing poverty than any other sector. While it is clear that enhancing agricultural productivity is one of the fastest ways out of poverty and achieving inclusive growth, especially under the changing climate today, Honorable Minister, it is critically important that we go in doing so in a way that builds climate resilience, doing so in a way that actually simultaneously resolve the very ecosystems that are the foundation of agricultural production, that underpins food production through ecosystem goods and services. Today, we already have the knowledge to do so, and simply raising agricultural productivity is not enough, especially under the changing climate. If we want to achieve food security, we must make sure that we look after the vital ecosystems that allow us to produce our food. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this means looking after the bees and insect pollinators, which is an ecosystem service that is necessary for the growth of 75% of all our crops used for human food, including in Africa. And increasing the quantity and the quality, as research has shown, the variety of pollinating insects can increase crop yield by over 20%. This means, regardless of how vibrant our seeds are, or how much fertilizers we apply, if we destroy the biodiversity and the bees and lose the pollinators, there will be no bumper harvest. The same goes for optimal soil structure, water, erosion prevention, among other crucial ecosystem services that are critical to optimizing food productivity. It means that looking after our soils and our water resources. It means protecting the rich biodiversity in our forests. It means building climate resilience, and it means sharing the knowledge and the technology that allows us to do all these things. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, if we do all of these things, if we can optimize food production at the on-farm level by applying ecosystem-based adaptation approaches, by making sure that our soils are intact, by making sure that the bees that pollinate almost 70% of our crops are intact, we can boost yields up to about 128%, as research has shown us through practical demonstration, and also help accompany farmers' income increases at minimal environmental costs. And this is not all. If we link the ecological production to clean energy like solar, like wind, we will not only expand the entire agro-value chain, but further linking it with information communication technology, naval markets and supply linkages, coupled with complementary policies, could actually spur an agro-industrial spirit across the African continent today, and catalyze not only an agro-economy worth $1 trillion in the next 13 years, but create almost about 17 million jobs. For example, right here in Zimbabwe, on-farm value addition using solar irrigation has increased household income by almost about 286%. Solar irrigation safeguards yields and means declining rainfall reliability. Solar irrigation is actually being taken up and powered by this solar, is providing an opportunity not only to ensure that agricultural production results to bumper harvest, but it's also helping to offset carbon and preserve the very ecosystems that strengthen response to climate change. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, what is even more important and better about this approach is that it does not have to require enormous resources. The ecosystem-based adaptation approach, for example, on-farm ecosystem-based adaptation, there is an Asian farming technique that is being utilized in West Africa called Zai. This simple technology, the hemicycle that is docked, as you can see on the infographic on the screen, docked in dry soils and used to grow seedlings, can turn crusted lands into nurseries by improving water retention, protecting seeds from being washed away, and concentrating nutrients and improving soil structure. If properly executed, it can increase yield by up to 500% in some of the trickiest terrains on Earth. It is already having a major impact on the dry Sahel region, where it has reclaimed severely degraded farmlands and raised farm yields from virtually nothing to about 400 kilograms of crop per hectare in a year of low rainfall. This simple technology is an opportunity that will be shared through this ecosystem-based adaptation for food security assembly framework. Honorable Minister, during the 6th special session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment in Egypt, Cairo last year, April, the Ministers of Environment adopted a decision on natural capital with focus on ecosystem-based adaptation-driven agriculture. The Maputo and the Malabo Declarations, as well as the African Union Agenda 2063, recognize agriculture as a means to achieve sustainable development goals in the continent. But it will take more than acknowledgement. As the African proverb goes, a roaring lion kills no game. However promising these frameworks might be, the will only be as good for Africa as their level of implementation. And that is why we are here today. This indeed shows that aside from these attractive frameworks, the achievement is not predestined, and fostering practical implementation frameworks is an area of need. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the greatest change occurs when people come together and rally around a common purpose. We have set for ourselves 17 sustainable development goals with a common intent to leave no one behind. The African Union Agenda 2063 promises to leave no one behind. The African Union Agenda 2063, which promises to leave no one behind, means that we need to bring people together. And a coming together of people, a rallying around a common purpose on a scale never witnessed before in history, is therefore needed. Today's glorious event marks a milestone in a journey that started about 16 months ago at the United Nations headquarters in Nairobi, under the auspices of the United Nations Environment and sister UN agencies like Food and Agricultural Organization, World Food Program, IFA, United Nations Development Program, in collaboration with stakeholders, private sector, civil society, NGOs, policymakers, and individual citizens, brought together 1,200 delegates, including from Zimbabwe here, and adopted the Nairobi Action Agenda and the Constitution of the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly, an inclusive Pan-African framework and implementation platform called EBAFOSA. EBAFOSA, Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, aims to ensure that EBA-driven agriculture approaches are linked to commercial value chains, especially to affordable financing, efficient access to markets, utilizing information communication technology, and accessible clean energy to catalyze agro-processing industry and upscale to being the norm in policy and practice across the African continent today. EBAFOSA have benefits to every person, including individual citizens, benefits to government, private sector, education, research institutions, youth, academia, individual citizens, NGOs, civil society. EBAFOSA is a solution space that bridges gaps and provides an opportunity that can turn a wide variety of aspects and ideas to benefit everyone. For government, EBAFOSA provides an opportunity and a vehicle to be used to domesticate relevant continental and global development blueprints like the Sustainable Development Goals, leveraging on ecosystems for food security and inclusive growth. To the private sector, EBAFOSA provides an opportunity, as you can see on the infographic, not only to ensure that we can link business to business, business to consumer networking and partnership.
Allow me to move on to the next phase and now ask Dr. Mtunu to come and give us a briefing on some of the EBA successes in Zimbabwe.
What we want to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is to give just a brief outline of what Zimbabwe is doing insofar as climate change and food security is concerned. I listened attentively when a song was presented and when Richard was speaking, and what I was able to pick, ladies and gentlemen, is you'll agree with me that our mother nature is in deep sorrow. It is in deep sorrow simply because some of her children are rebellious. So rebellious that they are poisoning the very mother nature that they have, the only one that they have, without which they can never be live. And they are poisoning it, most of them simply because we are trying to move very fast insofar as industrial revolution is concerned, with a total neglect of our environment. Some are trying to make big money out of it, and the whole process itself is a process of making our Mother Earth very sorrowful. Women, especially those that are living in the rural areas, you'll agree with me that they are the hardest hit. Why? It is simply because they rely on nature for almost everything that they need. The food, in some cases, in some countries in Africa and elsewhere, they are spending over 17 hours a day working on a piece of land that they do not own. We are fortunate in Zimbabwe that our women have become highly empowered by our government insofar as having the land is concerned. And as a result, women are able to produce. But then, as they produce, we need to ask ourselves, how are they producing? Zimbabwe, at the present moment, we are expecting about over 2 million metric tons of grain. And this is wonderful. It is simply as a result of our common agriculture. But yes, food security we're going to have it. But perhaps what we need to interrogate as Zimbabweans, as Africans, is that it is not only food security that is important. We need to go beyond food security and to make sure that the way we produce our food is actually in a manner that is sustainable. And in this case, sustainability refers to our ability to exploit our natural resources for the benefit of our own people and making sure that future generations are also going to benefit from our mother nature, possibly as a way of trying to remove the sorrow on the faces of our mother nature. And the question that I might want to pose to you and organizations here present and those that are represented is to ask the question, to what extent are we working towards making sure that we are producing what we want to produce food, we are doing our industrialization, and at the backdrop of that, to what extent are we realizing the importance of preserving our environment. This is where EBAFOSA is coming in. This is why Zimbabwe and many other parts of Africa have come together in Nairobi to come up with the EBAFOSA, and that's why, as Richard was saying, that's why AU also saw it fit that they gave us the go-ahead to implement it at national level and continental level. I also needed to say something about EBAFOSA itself, and in this case, I'm talking about the response to the responses that are given by organizations, particularly where I'm coming from. By the way, I'm coming from Midland State University from the Department of Development Studies, and the Midland State University itself has gone out there trying to make sure that we produce in a manner that is friendly to our environment. We have established some centers throughout the country. In fact, for now, we've got about 4 operational centers in rural areas. Why in rural areas? It is simply because most of our people in the rural areas rely on land. And if they rely on land, in some cases they are unable to get enough food. Why? It is simply because of climate change. We have got what we call community engagement centers in Berengwa, Slovela, Chibi, and Mangbe. And these community engagement centers, we do send our specialist areas from our Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources who are working with communities there. And in some cases, we've been also sending students to go and do their work-related learning in those particular areas. And the benefits have been very huge in the sense that people are beginning to warm up, particularly in the rural areas. They're beginning to warm up to this whole idea of ecosystems-based approaches or approaches to food security, to industrialization, whatever it is. And we have been able to provide a market for the produce that is coming from these areas. For instance, we've got a lot of chickens that are being produced in Berengwa, and the market is MSU itself. And how do they produce that? It is simply because we've got people, experts who are on the ground assisting them on day-to-day basis. In Slovenia, we've got huge water bodies there, and we're making use of these water bodies, and people are doing fishery, and we've got experts who are also posted to those centers who are assisting them. But we don't do this on our own. We also involve various stakeholders within the communities. And I must assure you that in the near future, we will also have to go, we are deciding actually, to go also to Token Kosi to make sure that we register our existence there insofar as food security EBAFOSA is concerned. I'm being warned by the Master of Ceremonies that we are time constrained. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me then to say EBAFOSA is the future. EBAFOSA is for you and me. EBAFOSA is for Africa. It is not for the Secretariat in Zimbabwe. We need to do this. We need to walk the whole way through together as governments, as institutions, financial institutions, if you want to put it that way, as universities, as individuals, and as non-governmental organizations. Together, we belong to this, and together it is our responsibility to make sure that we achieve this huge goal, that goal of making sure that we produce in a manner that is environmentally smart, as advised by our EBAFOSA for Africa. Africa for us, Africa for Africans, resources for Africa first, so that we don't look out to Europe, to America, for what we can produce in Africa using our own resources and our own technology. That's my plea to you. Thank you so much, Master of Ceremonies, Honorable Minister, thank you so much. This is the end of my presentation.
Honorable Dr. Joseph Madi, Minister of Agriculture, Mechanization, Irrigation and Development. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Water Resources. Other senior government officials present here. Dr. Richard Munanga, Coordinator Africa Regional Climate Change Program, UNEP. Development partners present here. Member of EBAFOSA, various chapters in Zimbabwe chapter in particular. Ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed. Indeed, it gives me a great pleasure to participate and share with you my remark at this special event that ushers in a compelling approach of ecosystem-based adaptation to sustainable food security, agricultural sector growth, and related industrial development. I'm very honored that we have the Honorable Minister of Agriculture present here. Ecosystem-based adaptation is particularly an important focus now, especially as we are launching as a country the new Sustainable Development Goals agenda, whose achievement of 17 goals are premised on a sustainably managed environment, physical environment. We heard a lot from the earlier speaker on this, not forgetting its relevance to the climate change adaptation roadmap that Zimbabwe has adopted through the National Climate Change Response Strategy and Action Plan. It is also a compelling agenda, especially considering that Zimbabwe is recovering from the worst 2015-16 drought, worst drought in 35 years. And that was immediately succeeded by equally very sad flooding, which we had earlier this year, which the effect on agriculture were exacerbated by poorly managed ecosystem and landscapes. The ecosystem-based adaptation approach to agriculture and related value chain development serves as a bridge between environment, human welfare, and economic growth, especially given that Zimbabwe's economy is anchored on the agricultural sector. The ecosystem-based adaptation approach considers environment as a whole system and recognizes that linkage within the system, that is between land, water, soil, and biodiversity, provide a variety of service and benefit for sustainable growth. Change in any one part of the environment may have positive, negative, or often unintended consequences on the agricultural sector and hence on economic growth. For example, inefficient agricultural practices and deforestation are driven by high dependence on natural resources, coupled with poor resource management, poverty, rapid population growth, ineffective policy implementation, slow and non-inclusive economic development, and more recently, climate change. Adopting and promoting EVA on agriculture implies several opportunities for Zimbabwe. Agro-based industries that are based on clean energy, agriculture production that conserve water through water-saving technology and practices, and other things, such as green agriculture supply chain, or that is, for example, organic fertilizer, pesticide, indigenous crop varieties that are highly productive, and cropping systems that promote biodiversity. Intensive cropping and livestock practices that do not require vast land area and thus that preserve the forest resources for Zimbabwe. And the need to pursue less consumptive agricultural value chains such as apiculture. The mention was made about saving bees. In order to actualize ecosystem-based adaptation-driven agro-industrialization, a number of policies and programs need to be pursued, and these can already be considered in carving the needs for EBAFOSA in Zimbabwe as we move forward. We acknowledge the principal mandate of EBAFOSA to support the implementation of various continental and global blueprint on food security and sustainable industrialization and development, including the AU Agenda 2063, the Africa Ministerial Conference for the Environment, AMSER, Cairo Declaration on Natural Capital, Maputo and Malaba Declaration, and related Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, CAADP. The UN system in Zimbabwe through the UN system in Zimbabwe through the UNDP Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment Program, the FAO and the WFP Food and Nutrition Security Initiative, UNIDO's Green Industries Focus on ILO's Green Job Initiative, and the SDG leadership are just a few among many initiatives that present obvious partnership and opportunity for working together within the context of the EBAFOSA. UNDP, through partnership with the EU, DFID, and SIDA, and of course the Ministry of Agriculture, Mechanization, and Irrigation Development, and other ministries have expanded the resilience building effort in Zimbabwe through creating a resilience building fund, which also provides a basis for scaling up the ecosystem-based approach involving small farmers in most vulnerable districts. Of course, given the climate change and the adaptation we need to do to adjust to the changes, resilient building becomes a very strong foundation. And I think this initiative which we have together with the Ministry of Agriculture is a pioneering step in this area. It is my hope that EBAFOSA will collaborate with the UN system and other civil service organizations and the cross-section of communities and partners to provide lesson learned and advice on application of the principle behind the ecosystem-based approaches. It is my hope that whilst EBAFOSA mandate lies with these mentioned global initiatives, it will align its work to better contribute to Zimbabwe's development priorities highlighted in the GIM asset and the ongoing planning for implementing the 11 priorities of the SDG which Zimbabwe has adopted. And in doing so, paying particular attention to integrating poverty and hunger eradication and sustainable management of natural resources. If a national plan of action for EBAFOSA is consciously designed with Zimbabwe's development priority in focus, there is potential to actualize the national SDGs target, and Zimbabwe's many other communities under the several UN global agreements, key of which are the Paris Agreement, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity, to name a few. A policy advocacy is an imperative agenda for EBAFOSA, and a few more suggestions include creating platforms that bring on board small and large scale farmers to collaborate with environment and NGOs and CBOs and finding cost-effective institutional channel and finance mechanism for scaling out, and also looking to the private sector and financial institutions which may offer even more effective market-based network and capability to achieve the objectives. I wish to congratulate UNIP and the African Center for Technological Studies for supporting this initiative, and the Agricultural Research Council for leading the leadership of EBAFOSA in Zimbabwe. I want to also share our gratitude to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture for his great leadership in looking for diversity and promoting agriculture and ensuring food security in Zimbabwe. Let me reiterate once again our support for this initiative, and UN in Zimbabwe will take a keen interest to work together and partner within the context of EBAFOSA framework. With this few remarks, I wish a successful launch of the EBAFOSA chapter in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to again call on the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Environment, Water and Climate, Mr. Paviliwo, to give us his talk.
Thank you very much, the Director of Ceremonies. Let me start by recognizing the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Mechanization and Irrigation Development, Dr. Joseph Made, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Mr. Bishop Barajuli, the Coordinator, Africa Regional Climate Change Program, UN Environment, Africa Office, Dr. Richard Manang, EBAFOSA Zimbabwe Chapter President, Ms. Josiah Nemashakwe, EBAFOSA Zimbabwe Chapter Secretariat, Agricultural Research Council, represented by Dr. Isaiah Marapara, government officials, representatives from the private sector, civil society, the research and academia institutions, members of the media fraternity, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you representing the Honorable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate, Honorable Minister Mchinguri, who has not been able to be with us due to other commitments. And she then sent me to come and be with you. So as I read the speech, it is the speech which she had prepared to come and deliver. I have only slightly adapted it so that I don't sound as if I'm the minister, but I'm just conveying the message that the minister has given. It is my pleasure to address this occasion of the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation and Food Security Assembly Zimbabwe chapter launch. This initiative is coming at an opportune time as climate change stands as the most serious threat to human and environmental well-being in sub-Saharan African countries, and this also includes Zimbabwe. The African landscape, and in particular Southern Africa, is encountering severe climate change shocks. The shifts in temperature and rainfall are having significant negative impacts on the environment, biodiversity, and human life. Approximately 70% of Zimbabwe's population lives in rural areas, where about 80% of them rely on rain-fed agriculture for their livelihoods, which makes them highly vulnerable to climate variability and change. The country and the region at large is impacted on by increasing maximum temperature, increased rainfall variability characterized by severe drought spells, and in some cases, extreme cases of flooding and drought. These occurrences have resulted in significant decline in both crop and livestock productivity, infrastructure destruction, increased human-wildlife conflict, and increased pest and disease instances. This calls for enhanced efforts towards climate change adaptation across all sectors to improve community resilience. To achieve food security, the agricultural sector needs to enhance its adaptive capacity through transformation in the management of natural resources like land, water, soil nutrients, and genetic resources in the production cycle. Transition to such systems could also generate significant mitigation benefits by increasing carbon sinks, as well as reducing emissions per unit of agricultural activity. The need for all parties to the UNFCCC to reduce emissions is at the center of climate change negotiations. The government of Zimbabwe signed the Paris Agreement on climate change, and its ratification is at final stages. The Paris Agreement establishes the global goal on adaptation and requires all parties to the agreement to set their own greenhouse gas emission reduction targets through the nationally determined contributions. And as Zimbabwe, we have got an interministerial committee which also encompasses various private sector players. We have already submitted our intended nationally determined contributions. And once the process is through, this then forms the basis upon which our nationally determined contributions are going to be followed. My ministry has developed the climate change response strategy, which provides climate change mitigation and adaptation options for all sectors. A national policy, climate policy, has just been approved by Cabinet and will be launched during the course of this year. The policy will provide overarching framework for implementation of the strategy I've just mentioned, and these two documents are meant to guide efforts towards climate change adaptation and mitigation in pursuit of low carbon and climate resilient Zimbabwe. Currently, the ministry is developing national adaptation plan through a stakeholder consultation process. We are in the final stages of developing a Green Climate Fund project proposal which aims to promote climate smart agriculture and enhancing adaptive capacity for rural households in southern Zimbabwe, specifically those under the Sawe, Runde, and Mzimwane catchments, which are more vulnerable to climate change. There is also ongoing work to develop a climate smart agriculture manual for agricultural education in Zimbabwe with funding from the Climate Technology Center and Network. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my ministry is grateful to the coming in of the ecosystem-based adaptation for food security assembly to Zimbabwe as their programs are set to complement government efforts and priorities with regards to climate change adaptation and food and nutrition security in Zimbabwe. EBAFOSA, as we now all know, is an inclusive pan-African framework and platform for countries, institutions, and communities to rally together and engage in the implementation of sustainable systems on resource management. In view of the global threat from climate change, the focus of EBAFOSA should be to foster linkages, knowledge and experience sharing, as well as peer learning across the African continent. It is my hope that this initiative will enhance Zimbabwe's capacity to meet its national and international development goals as pronounced in the Zimbabwe Agenda for Sustainable Socio-Economic Transformation, Africa Union's Agenda 2063, and the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, among other programs, that results in real long-term benefits and statements, long-term benefits and sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for those kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on, and allow me at this point to call in our guest of honor, the Minister, Dr. Joseph Made, to give us
I want to recognize our guest here, Dr. Richard Mona, is the one who is visiting. I understand you arrived last night. You are most welcome. Other than your former post, you are coming from a nation related to soccer, Roger Miller. So we also welcome you from that point of view. I want to recognize the UNDP press rep, Mr. Bishop Paratu. I also want to recognize Minister Chingul, represented by the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Pashubiwo. Then we have our chapter president. He gave us some remarks. He's seated right at the end time. Allow me to also recognize farmers' representatives in the salutations here. There was a note on the Farmers Union presidents. They might not be here, I didn't see them, but I recognize them. Otherwise, I want to defer to the salutations as given by Ambassador and say all protocols observed in the interest of time. But allow me to recognize other colleagues in here, or lest they will say, oh, Minister, these days you forget us. There's Andrew Mshita there, and Mr. Agutan, who was seated there. These are the veterans in the Ministry of Agriculture, but sitting there quietly in terms of some of the issues we are grappling with, as well as also development of the human resources. There's a representative here of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Mache, Director, is seated there. Agriculture, but he is a livestock man in his own right. But I want to recognize industrialists also. They play a major role. And I recognize a very special guest to the Ministry of Agriculture this morning, where we are working on some project, and I want to fully recognize the two colleagues from Italy. You can stand up. You can stand for 1 minute. You can take a seat. Yes, of course, we didn't introduce them, but these are, for the other colleagues here who might be familiar, these are the leaders in the technology development that is now utilizing the organic material and the processes in Europe. And I am talking from an engineering point of view. So that we understand and appreciate when we talk of energy, sustainable energy, in terms of the solar power, we also talk of the organic material, the biogas. These colleagues, as simple as they might look, they are the ones leading the program and the project that is now enabling individual farmers in Europe to produce surplus electricity to sell even to the national grid. And this is some of the pioneering work that we are looking at in terms of designing such projects. Yes, sometimes we do it quietly, but sometimes publicly. So there's a lot of work that is going on. Europe now is achieving areas of organic material in terms of your fertilizers, the inorganic material, as well as the organic materials. Some farmers are now achieving use of fertilizers to the extent of 50% or 75% organic and 25% inorganic, and so on. This facilitates correcting the soil pH. It facilitates moisture retention, because we might be mistaken to think that in climate it's only a question of developing water bodies and so on. Not necessarily. You can have no precipitation of any form for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What will then happen if you are not able to also handle the soil? So when we talk of water, irrigation, it must be combined with the primary land preparation and conditioning the soil. And I also want to emphasize here, because I noted some remarks. By the way, Africa is not homogeneous. Our extremes are from complete desert to the tropics with very high rainfall. So when we make the remarks, they must be relevant. Africa is not homogeneous from that point of view. I thought I just made that remark, because it's very important as we set the strategies. And also, by the way, Zimbabwe in particular, we will position ourselves globally. We will look at technologies worldwide. We will position ourselves to put our own human resources in that position of working with the world. We will not isolate ourselves and be an island, not at all. And we squarely seek to exploit our natural resources for our own good as well as the good of the world. I'm honored to launch the Zimbabwe National Branch of the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly, EBAFOSA, under the theme, Shaping Zimbabwe's Food Security and Climate Resilience through EBAFOSA. The theme of the launch captures the current government's thrust, the Zimbabwe Agenda for Sustainable Socio-Economic Transformation, ZIM-ASSET, and the 10-point plan wherein sustainable agriculture and food and nutrition security remain a top policy priority. In line with the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular goal number 2, and the Maputo Declaration of 2003 and the Malabo Declaration of 2013 on a Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, CADP. Ecosystem-based adaptation for food security assembly is an inclusive Pan-African policy dialogue and implementation platform, which is a product of the Nairobi Action Agenda adopted at the Second Africa Environment Program, UNEP, in collaboration with the African Union Commission, the AUC, the African Center for Technology Studies, ACTS, and the other partners on 30 to 31 July 2015. The principal mandate of EBAFOSA is to support implementation of various global and continental blueprints on food security, sustainable industrialization and development, including promotion of renewable energy investments in rural areas to catalyze rural agro-industry. I think I made a pertinent remark relating to the colleagues from Italy. We did the work we are doing with Europe, other parts of the world as well. An ecosystem-based adaptation for food security assembly is a continental institution that delivers its mandate through the national branches and oral chapters, and today we celebrate the launch of the Zimbabwe chapter. I just wish to give a remark relating to the policy position of Zimbabwe, and I think the UN made some related pertinent remark. Zimbabwe does not quarrel with the science and its development in terms of methods and so on. But however, Zimbabwe's position is very clear. We will not accept GMO material or BT-related materials, and Zimbabwe will remain free of those materials. I just thought I restate that position. Our position obviously is driven by, first and foremost, as long as the debate is raging in terms of the consumer, we are sensitive to the fact that Zimbabwe's population related to its land base, the two, we have a bigger land base than Zimbabwe's population. So we can address our own direct food security by addressing other matters that relate to mechanization, to soil fertility, and in particular water. These are the factors constituting 80% of the issue of production and productivity, not the other way around. I thought I should make this remark. The second remark I wish to make, because there is so much debate now on the matters that relate to the actual issue of production, first and foremost, and also productivity. Very formally, of course, we are harvesting the crop now, Zimbabwe's crop. That includes both grains, cereals, pulses, as well as the cash crop. All I can say is that this season is very, very good. The yields far exceed our own expectations. But once we start harvesting, we now start dealing with the proper actual field harvest and extrapolations. So I will soon be issuing data related to that. So any other piece of data that's being given is speculative. We will produce the proper formal data. It could be near or even surpass the speculation. But until we have formally put it, we still base our yields on the first round crop assessment until we stated the formal position. I also just want to point out, because our doctor from Midland State University did mention a bit on the marketing. It's very important that everybody knows that some years back under ESAP, which was a program that was heavily advised by Western interests, a lot of the parastatals were disbanded or were mothballed in the interest of the state, taking a facilitative role side by side with the private sector. It's very clear, at least in the model that is dealing with food and agricultural production, that already as directed by Cabinet, we are going to re-establish the parastatals that deal with marketing, as well as create new ones. And you might want to know that there will be the re-establishment of the Dairy Marketing Board, because soon now we will be expanding the dairy sector. So the government needs to take a central role in supporting the farmers, small, large, and medium. We will also be debating the issue of the Cold Storage Commission, and this should not be confused with the cold storage company. That is a company owned 100% by government. We will also be re-establishing the Cotton Marketing Board, and that should not be confused with the Cotton Company of Zimbabwe, which is owned 100% by the government of Zimbabwe. The Pig Industry Board is already there. It's going to be expanded so that it also develop its own state-of-the-art slaughter facilities in order to support the farmers. I'm just referring to the matter of marketing and marketing institutions. Obviously, the TIMB, that one stands directed to immediately decentralize the marketing of tobacco. Tobacco is the only crop at the moment that is the major foreign currency earner, but because of what it is, it used to service only 200 to 600 commercial farmers. Now it is servicing over 20,000, 30,000 farmers. So it's very logical that TIMB moves with the speed to decentralize marketing. That does not mean it has got to split the buyers and so on. Not at all. The buyers can have 1 day per week in each of the designated areas. We already have courtesy of the media highlighting the operations of the decentralized marketing places. So we would like to see an addition of 3 other places. We cannot accept further subjugation of our small farmers to what is currently happening at the auction floors. For Food and Security Assembly, EBAFOSA Zimbabwe chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, EBAFOSA has been launched.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we've got work to do. All of us should have that work to do. Now the Minister will put the seal on this by signing.
Tolita mira, Ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored and privileged to get this opportunity to present a vote of thanks on this historic occasion. I, on behalf of EBAFOSA Zimbabwe Secretariat, convey deep regards and happy thanks to our guest of honor, the Minister of Agriculture, Mechanization and Irrigation Development, Dr. Joseph Madi. Thank you for your gracious presence. To the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Water and Climate, Mr. Mpajulio, thank you for your very informative address. My sincere thanks to the Coordinator for Africa Regional Program, UNEP, Dr. Richard Munang. Thank you for your enlightening talk, for pioneering this concept, and for guiding the Zimbabwe Secretariat, EBAFOSA, in setting up the Secretariat for Zimbabwe. Special thank you to the UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Bisho Parajuli, for your support in this initiative. A big thank you to Dr. Matunu for giving us the update on Zimbabwe and how EBAFOSA does in fact work. To the entertainment, Mr. Mujati, Mr. Pofu, and Mr. Zere, we thank you for very entertaining. I convey thanks to all distinguished participants here today who have come from distant locations to attend this launch. And as Dr. Munang said, let us focus on the implementation of these frameworks. Let us be like the United Spiders so we conquer the lions of poverty, of climate change, and food insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with this quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. An individual has not started living until he can rise above the confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. I wish you all God's protection and journey mercies to all your various destinations. Thank you very much.
The Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly, it's a platform which was created in July 2015 with the UN Environment coming together with the African Union Commission and stakeholders from government, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, private sector, and individual citizens with intent to ensure that we can have a common framework whereby people come together to not only work with nature but do so in such a way that the agricultural systems are actually connected. So the ultimate end goal of EBAFOSA was to bring everyone on board and have a framework which connects the dots. That is, what is produced on the farm is done so not working against the environment but working with nature and connected to markets through using approaches, for example, like information communication technology, and engaging actors on the ground with a common intent to ensure that ecosystem-based adaptation approaches are upstream to become part of policy and also part of the entire development agenda.
EBAFOSA Zimbabwe is going to benefit the youth by encouraging collaboration, cooperation, and bringing youth together from different parts of the country. So we want diversity, we want people who come from all parts of the country so that we can work together and learn new ideas, feed off each other, and create a system based implement our program based on the framework that EBAFOSA has set up and bring together all the youth throughout the country.
EBAFOSA is a platform where we are harnessing resources to enable communities, private sector and government to appreciate ecosystem-based adaptation for food security. We launched EBAFOSA Zimbabwe chapter today, the 12th of May 2017, and we are hoping that through this launch we are able to map out our stakeholders in Zimbabwe from different sectors of the economy to be able now to go on the ground and drive the ecosystem-based adaptation programs. We are hoping that working with government, working with private sector, working as well with NGOs, donor communities, and the farmers themselves as well were able to achieve our goals and move forward as a nation towards food security and climate resilience. Our future plans as EBAFOSA Zimbabwe chapter is to work with government in order to promote the harmonization of policies towards ecosystem-based adaptation, as well as mapping out the stakeholders in different sectors of the economy and society to be able to find their strengths, find their resources to harness ecosystem-based adaptation, basically saying from the farm production level to the consumer, we should be able to find linkages towards achieving our goals and objectives.
This launch of EBAFOSA, especially in Zimbabwe, has brought about opportunities not only for us, but the rest of Zimbabwe. First and foremost, Zim Earthworm as a company is an earthworm-based company. So basically everything we do in this company is earthworm-based. For starters, let me delve into the social aspect of our company, since our company falls in line with the Zim Asset initiatives and goals. We also have delved into women empowerment. So basically what we've done is we've gone into rural areas and we have taught women how to breed earthworms. So what happens is that when we do our training lessons, each woman leaves with a starter pack with a few earthworms and a manual on how to make their own compost so they can feed the earthworms, because our particular earthworms cannot dwell well in soil, they need compost. So what happens now is that we do not leave them just there yet. After we train them and after they've accumulated a sufficient amount of earthworms, we go and buy earthworms from them and we've trained them. So basically this is the social aspect and what we're contributing to members of citizens of Zimbabwe.
We are into organic enriched fertilizers. Organic enriched fertilizers is a concept in Zimbabwe, maybe for 5 years now. It was after a lot of research work on soil fertility management, when it was concluded that chemical fertilizers on their own, they cannot manage the soils, and organic fertilizers on their own, they cannot manage the soils, because the soils are getting degraded, they are getting acidified, the crop yields are going down, there's climate change as well, and it's affecting the country in terms of a number of droughts and also sometimes erratic floods or excess rains. So it was actually, research actually found out that a combination of organic and chemical, or integrating the two, is the way forward. So as a company, that's what we actually managed to do. We are integrating organic and chemicals into fertilizers. So we've got compound fertilizers for different field crops and also top dressing fertilizers for different field crops. The way we do it, we take quality manures, maybe from chicken, from cattle, from pig, and then we compost, and then we sterilize, and then we granulate. And after granulating them, then we blend with chemical components, and then we formulate different types of fertilizers that have got measured components or nutrient components that we actually know. Like for example, for maize, we have got 777, meaning that we've got a fertilizer that has got 7% nitrogen, 7% phosphorus, and 7% potash. We also add sulfur. In other fertilizers like the compound C, we also add boron. So these fertilizers, they are actually proving to be very effective in terms of nutrients use efficiency, in terms of resisting droughts, in terms of resisting excessive rains, and the farmers are getting very good yields.